The traction circle is a great tool to use in RST. It allows us to be able to visualize what are the limits of the tire by being able to graph both the lateral and longitudinal acceleration. For this graph, you don't really need any parameters. We're just measuring the lateral and longitudinal acceleration. So to use this, you can use it pretty much with any game without having to fill out any car parameters. You can find this graph by coming to suspension and then on the drop down under suspension, selecting traction circle. This will pull up the graph page that you see here. You'll see there's a few different graphs here. The main one that we have on the left hand side, this is really to what we refer to as the traction circle. The x-axis is the lateral acceleration, so the amount of G's that we pull in a corner. And then the y-axis is the longitudinal acceleration, or the amount of G's that we pull when we're accelerating or braking. The graphs on the right, they're kind of flavors of that traction circle. The top right one here is the longitudinal acceleration. And sometimes we want to see the effects of speed and how we get more downforce as time goes on. So we actually have this top right graph. It measures longitudinal acceleration on the x-axis, but on the y-axis, we're measuring speed. And you can see as we gain speed here on this front left side, as the car picks up in speed, we are able to brake harder. So the longitudinal acceleration at 100 kilometers per hour is right around 1.5 G. At 200 plus, we're able to pull about 1.87. So we are gaining more braking power as we gain speed, which means the car is producing downforce. So this is a really good way to start to understand, how the car is impacted by downforce. On the bottom right, it's the exact same thing, except it's the x-axis is the lateral acceleration and the y-axis is speed. So the bottom right one is for cornering, the top right one is for braking and straight line acceleration, and the traction circle is here on the left. So how can you use these traction circles, right? We already kind of gave some ideas about how you might use it. Well, the biggest thing that I use the traction circle when I'm doing setup work is really to understand, what is how do we characterize the track? Where are we spending the most time in terms of left or right corners? Is it a lot of straight line acceleration? Are we doing a lot of trail braking? Those are some of the questions that come through my mind when I'm thinking about how we're going to set up the car for the track and what is going to be our setup philosophy for this track. And the traction circle can really help you understand where is the car spending the most time. So if we look at the traction circle for this is a lap at Donington. I just selected my quickest lap, which is a 1:28 here. I did some practice here for a race. I don't remember when, but I think it's probably for SRO. And let's go ahead and look at the traction circle. You can see there's some regions of this traction circle where we're spending a little bit more time. So you can see this section here, which is going to be your right-handers, while you're trail braking a little bit. You're not really spending a lot of time there, but we are spending a little bit more time in the, this was just for left-hand turns. This is for right-hand turns. Donington has more right-hand turns, left-hand turns. So this is going to be where we're loading up the left-hand side more. And you can see there's more points in there. So the density of the points tells us, is it spending more time or less time? You can see the greatest point density is right around on the acceleration phase. So we're spending a lot of time in acceleration, and especially in this straight line acceleration here. And then a little bit in the straight line braking, right? When we have zero lateral acceleration, so we're not cornering at all, but we're pulling right around 2 G's. We're really braking really, really hard. You can see there's a little bit of a point distribution. We did add some opaqueness to this graph, so you will be able to, the point density will be a little bit brighter in the areas where there's more points. But this can help us understand, again, how is the car being loaded? Like I said, looking at this, we can see there's a lot more points on the left-hand side. And then specifically, you can see how dark this red region is here. This is a little bit of acceleration. We're pulling about 0.5 G's of longitudinal acceleration, so a little bit straight line acceleration. And then we're pulling like 1.32 G's in cornering. So this is where we're spending a lot of time. So that's telling me, that rear left tire is really going to start carrying a lot of this load. This is where a lot of that load's going to be. So I'm already thinking about, okay, let's make sure the tire wear is okay. Let's make sure we're not overheating that rear left tire. So this is already, before I even do laps and before I even look at tire temperature data or tire wear data, I know that that rear left tire is something that we're going to want to spend a little bit of time and, monitoring just by looking at this traction circle. So one thing I want to point out with the traction circle is it also allows us to understand if setups are giving us more grip or less grip. If you think of this traction circle, the idea is you want to make this traction circle as wide as possible. The wider this traction circle is, or the greater the radius is, the more G's are going to be cornering through the corners, which ideally means you're carrying more speed, which means lower lap times. So anytime you're doing setup work, anything you can do to get this to be expanded, the better. So a lot of times if I'm doing setups, I'll see if there's any change in the traction circle, and hopefully it expands. That's kind of the goal of the setup engineer, is to really try to expand the circle as much as possible. One thing that we said is, again, the x-axis is lateral acceleration, so you're cornering. The y-axis is your longitudinal acceleration. One thing that a lot of viewers might ask is, why is it called a circle? It looks more like a diamond or a heart or something, right? It's not perfectly symmetrical. And part of that is because of the scale. So I'm just going to scale this in. But you can still see it's a little bit flat up top, right? If we ignored the top part, it would be a circle down here, right? As we asked more longitudinal acceleration, as we break more, these longitudinal accelerations becoming negative, we're not able to corner as much, right? So it kind of turns into zero lateral acceleration at our peak longitudinal acceleration, and vice versa for lateral, right? That's what the whole idea of the traction circle, and the idea that we can, never ask the tires to do 100% cornering or 100% braking, right? There's always some balance there. Well, one thing is the top of this is pretty flat, right? It's no longer a circle. There's no radius here, and the reason why is this is a GT3 car, and in GT3 cars, the engine is not power enough to be grip limited by the tires. It's actually grip limited by the engine. We're not able to produce enough power down to just break the wheels, right? So you can see the tires, they mostly will pull 2 Gs. Here at cornering, we're cornering at like 1.9, braking probably like 1.9, right around 2. At a straight line acceleration, where lateral acceleration 0, the max longitudinal acceleration is only about 0.5 G. So in straight line acceleration, the engine's only able to produce about 0.5 G, and we know the tire is capable of 2 Gs, so we're nowhere near grip limited on the tire. That is not going to be true for like a Formula 1 car or even an LMP car, where the power to weight distribution is a little bit different. For those kind of cars, you probably will see more of a circle, and less of this kind of flat top. But I just wanted to point that out because I know there will be a lot of questions as to why it's called a traction circle, but it's not actually a circle in this example. So we talked about how you can use a traction circle for setup optimization. Again, you want to try to maximize the radius or make the circle as big as possible. If you do a setup change and the circle gets smaller, then you know you're going in the wrong direction. We've also talked about how you can use the point density in this graph to understand where is the car spending the most time. How do we characterize the track, and what tire should we be looking at as we develop this setup? Again, here was that rear left tire. We know it's going to get a lot of work. And there's more points over here on this side here than this side. So I already know that those left-hand tires are going to get more worn anyways. So we're really focusing on the tire wear of that left-hand tire. We're probably not as interested on the right-hand tires. But another thing is, again, downforce, right? Like I said, with these longitudinal lateral acceleration graphs as a function of speed, this really tells us how much downforce do we gain per increment of speed here, right? Here again at 100 kilometers per hour at 1.5, at 200 plus, we're like 1.9. So there's a little bit of a slope here. So on the longitudinal acceleration, negative numbers are braking, positive numbers are on throttle. So, acceleration, forward acceleration. So you can see there's a slope here, right? If there was no slope to this, meaning that at 100 kilometers per hour, you're pulling the same amount of Gs as 200 kilometers per hour, that would tell you that this car is not very sensitive to downforce. And why that's really important is that might mean, okay, instead of making the car very stiff, I might want to make the car a little bit softer, add a little bit more kind compliance to the tire, give me a little bit more mechanical grip, right? Rely more on the tire and get some of that mechanical grip out. I'm not going to really gain time by, stiffening the suspension, keeping those ride heights constant for downforce effects, right? It's not going to be there. If this line is very steep, meaning it's very, very sensitive, meaning at low speeds, you're maybe at 1.5, but at 200 plus, you're like, 2.3 or something high like that. And it's there's a very steep slope there. That tells you the car is very sensitive to downforce, meaning you're going to gain a lot of acceleration or speed or grip by really focusing on the downforce, which might mean, hey, maybe I need to make the suspension a little bit stiffer. Maybe I need to, not be as soft, take away some of that mechanical grip, that wheel compliance, and focus more on the keeping the ride heights constant so that we can maximize the downforce. So that's why this speed versus grip graph is really, really powerful, is it can help you understand, where is a car sensitive to in terms of downforce. Do I need to focus on downforce, or should I focus more on mechanical grip? And the same thing with the lateral acceleration as a function of speed. This one, it might not trend as much. You can see here at this corner at 220 kilometers, we're pulling like, a lot of G's here, 2.3. That might just be the track layout. Maybe this is a track where, there's certain corner distribution. So there probably won't be as much of a relationship here. One thing you can do is when you're comparing two setups, look at this and then see if you get more acceleration or less acceleration at that same corner. This is a great way to kind of look at that as well. But again, these speed versus acceleration graphs are really good for kind of characterizing the downforce. But that's going to be it, guys. Again, we try to keep these videos nice and sweet just to give you an overview of what this graph is. If you have any questions, please let us know in the Discord or in the YouTube comments below. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Happy tuning. This is Zach from RC. I'll catch you guys later.